Imagine coming home and finding a set of footprints in the fresh snow leading from the forest directly to your front door. But crucially, there are no tracks leading back out.
Okay, that is an immediate move out and burn the house down situation for me.
It gets worse. For the next few days, you hear pacing in your attic and find newspapers you never bought, but every time you search the house, you find absolutely no one.
So you're telling me someone is living in the walls? This sounds like a horror movie trope.
For the Gruber family in 1922 Germany, it wasn't a movie. It was the prelude to one of the most chilling, unsolved mass murders in history, where the killer didn't just strike and flee, they moved in for the weekend. This all went down at Hinterkaifeck, a remote farmstead tucked away in the Bavarian woods, about 40 miles north of Munich. It was home to the Grubers, patriarch Andreas, his wife Kazilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her two young children.
Um, Remote farm, isolated family, classic setup. But were they the wholesome farm family type, or were there skeletons in the closet?
Oh, more like a whole cemetery. The Grubers were local pariahs. Andreas was known as a brutal, abusive man, and the town knew a dark secret. Andreas and his daughter Victoria were in an incestuous relationship.
Wow, so the neighbors weren't exactly dropping by with apple pies.
Exactly. They were socially isolated and physically cut off. This isolation created a perfect vacuum for something sinister to happen. In late 1921, their maid actually quit because she was convinced the house was haunted by spirits.
Spirits? Or just someone who knew how to hide in a farmhouse better than the Grubers knew how to look?
That's the big question. By March 1922, Andreas started telling neighbors about the footprints in the snow and the missing house keys, but he never called the police. On March 31st, a new maid named Maria Baumgartner arrived at the farm. She had been there for only a few hours when the sun went down.
So what actually happened that night? Did someone just break in through the front door?
It was more calculated than that. Investigators believe the killer set up shop in the barn and lured the family members out one by one.
How do you lure 4 adults and 2 kids into a barn without the others noticing?
They think the killer caused a commotion with the livestock. Andreas went out to check the noise, and the killer struck him with a mattock, a heavy pickaxe-like tool. Then his wife came out looking for him, then Victoria, then the 7-year-old granddaughter, Kazilia.
One by one into the dark? That is terrifying.
It's gruesome. The killer stacked the 4 bodies in the barn and covered them with hay. Then they walked into the house, murdered the new maid in her bedroom, and finally killed the 2-year-old Joseph, who was sleeping in his cot.
This is where most killers would run as fast as possible, right? They've just wiped out an entire household.
You would think, but this is where the Hinterkaifeck story shifts from a murder to a nightmare. The killer stayed. For the next 3 days, smoke rose from the chimney. Neighbors saw the family dog tied up but fed, the cattle were watered, and someone ate food from the kitchen and slept in the beds.
Wait, so the killer was just playing house with 6 corpses nearby?
Precisely. They lived there until April 3rd. It wasn't until the 4th, when the mail carrier noticed letters piling up and a search party went in, that the bodies were discovered.
Please tell me they caught the guy.
They didn't. The investigation was a disaster. Villagers trampled the crime scene before police arrived. Since the farm was so isolated and the bodies were days old, the trail was cold. They interviewed over 100 suspects, including a neighbor named Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who supposedly had a grudge against Andreas. They even examined the possibility that Victoria's husband, who supposedly died in World War I, had actually survived and come back for revenge.
So why are we still talking about a 100-year-old farm murder? Is it just the creep factor?
It's the psychological puzzle. And the 3-day stay suggests a perpetrator who wasn't a random thief. Robbery wasn't even the motive, as gold and cash were left untouched. It suggests someone who felt they had a right to be there, or someone so detached from reality that they found comfort in the silence of the farm they just emptied.
And the farm itself? Does it still exist?
No, the locals were so spooked they demolished it a year later. They basically tried to erase the site from the earth, but the mystery endured. In 2007, a modern police academy used high-tech forensics to re-examine the cold case files.
Did they get a name?
They actually did identify a prime suspect, but they refused to release the name out of respect for the suspect's living descendants. Because of the botched 1922 investigation, they can't prove it 100% anyway.
What's the one thing to remember about the Hinterkaifeck murders?
It serves as a haunting reminder that sometimes the most dangerous threat isn't the one that breaks in, but the one that's already inside, listening to your footsteps.
That's Wikipedia. Every story on demand. Search your next topic at wikipedia.ai.